The main point is that Africa, as an aggregate, should be able to achieve the fastest growth in the world economy for the next 40 years. That's in part because Africa starts as the poorest region. It starts as the region that still needs the most investments in high return areas, especially in human capital and in infrastructure. And that means, and it's demonstrated in hundreds of studies, that there is a potential for convergence in economies, meaning that countries that start out poorer per capita can grow faster. The idea of Africa growing at 7% per capita per year for the next 40 years is ambitious but realistic. When you grow at 7% per capita, you double every 10 years. And so when we were asked at the beginning, could you reach $65,000? Well, if Africa were to grow at 7% per year between now and 2063, the answer is that Africa would be at $71,000 per capita. It's feasible. This is what China has achieved. This is what India is achieving right now. This is what Africa can achieve. To do that, there has to be much higher investment levels than now. I know you have to go, but boosting investment is key. A lot of that is going to have to be financed by international capital flows, not by domestic finance, because the economies are poor today, but the world is rich. And so there's $30 trillion of annual saving, and several hundred billion easily can be attracted to Africa, both in equity and in debt. But it's not happening right now adequately. One of the reasons is the region gets bad advice from the IMF, terrible advice. The advice is don't borrow, you have a debt crisis. This is wrong. If you take debt today and it is properly used, and you double and then double and then double and then double your economy over the next 40 years, the economy is 16 times larger. The debt to GDP of debt taken on today is a 16th of what it is in 40 years. My advice is borrow a lot more, but at long term. Don't get into a short-term debt trap, but don't lose the chance to invest in high-return investments. The single highest return investment in Africa is a young child. I mean that not morally, I mean that economically. If you invest in a young child today in the quality of their education, ensure that they have at least 12 years of quality education minimum, but probably 15 years is what's needed in the 21st century, you will get compound returns of about 20% on that child. That's better than Silicon Valley. It is. But the governments can't afford that right now. So we need financing for education. And no joke financing, and not financing for education 20 years from now, and not education where there's no school, no online, no teachers, no digital, no devices, no data. Come on, that's not education in the 21st century. So we have to work out a practical investment plan for infrastructure and for human capital. In the chapter that I wrote for this study, and I was privileged to be part of it, I used a quantitative model to show borrow, make the debt reach 200% of GDP, 250% of GDP. That's okay. If it's well invested, it comes down to 40% of GDP 40 years from now. In other words, the IMF's got it all wrong. They use a static model. They say if you're poor, don't reach more than 30% of GDP in debt or 40% of GDP in debt. I'm ashamed of this because these are my students there. I gave them a PhD, but what I taught them was if the returns to investment are higher than the cost of capital, take it. And the returns on investing in education, on electrification, on transport, on shipping, on ports, on digital are far higher than the cost of capital. But of course, we also have to work on both ends of this. What should be invested, long-term public investment strategies, and the cost of capital. And for that, we need a massive increase of capitalization of the African Development Bank and the other multilateral development banks. The scale is just far too low to lend $5 to $10 billion a year out of the African Development Bank. It should be 10 times that. Literally, not just because it would be a nice thing, but it really needs to be much bigger. And it could be. And by the way, it should be mainly African resources. And one nice thing about the Trump administration, okay? You will know you're on your own, okay? So we want Africa, I want Africa, you want Africa to be a high-income, advanced region in 40 years. No doubt it's feasible. I'm telling you, no doubt. You have an Agenda 2063. You need the financing behind it. You need the NEPAD plans actually invested in. All of the rail, the road, the ports. You need a unified Africa so the borders are not blocking you, because the Congress of Berlin and its aftermath left you with 55 separate countries. And the only way some of these borders were ever drawn was by people who never even visited. Okay? It's all right. It's possible to live within that, but not for trade and finance and infrastructure. That has to be region-wide. That has to be truly an African continental free trade area. And it can be. Why not? It's going to enrich everybody. Every president should be happy to be part of this. They're all going to be enriched. And I would say to any leader in this continent, you can't do it except as part of a rich continent. So it's not a matter of I'm going to do it faster than my neighbor. You're going to do it because your neighbor's also going to be able to do it. And so this is my basic point. There's no magic to getting rich. There's also no shortcut. It's investing. Part of the investing is every year the child needs to advance, learn what is appropriate, get a good education. That's the most important investment of all. And the rest of it is the physical infrastructure, the climate resilience, and the other things that will be needed. The business will come. That's how business does it. They don't really care as long as they can make a profit. And if you want to attract foreign investment, the first thing they're going to ask is, are there the skilled workers around? That's what they ask, actually. They ask, do I have engineers here? Am I going to be able to make this plant operate? Is it going to work? They want to know about the skilled workforce. When I spend my time in Southeast Asia, as I do, in Malaysia or Indonesia or Cambodia, everyone, the only question that they're invested, where are the engineers? How am I going to build? Is this the right place to have the factory? That's what they want to know. So all the industrialization can occur, but make the engineers, make the people who can run the factories, of course. And with the beauty of online education, all of this can be done so much faster. The training can be done so much pervasively. You have a Africa-wide university now put online education, master's degrees, have the biggest revolution of education, and finance what's needed, and don't be shy about the debt part of it, because if we do the arithmetic on the Excel spreadsheet, what looks large today is minimal 40 years from now. And not investing in it is a crusher, because 40 years from now you'll be at the same level you are now, which makes no sense. And the IMF can't get that through their heads for the last 40 years, honestly. And the reason is it's at 19th and Pennsylvania Avenue, okay? It's not in Addis Ababa, it's not in Accra, it's not in Dar es Salaam, it's not in Dakar. If it were, everyone would have figured it out a long time ago. So this is a great report. Go for rapid growth, do the arithmetic for it, but then build the African Development Bank and the other institutions at a 10-time scale, and go for growth, and you'll find the money flowing into the continent. It'll flow in because everyone will know this is the fastest growing region in the whole world. We need to be here. Thank you.